3 years, 4 months, and 11 days. I know the number because I kept a small leather journal on the nightstand. Not to track my bitterness, I want to be clear about that, but because the counselor I saw for 2 months after the blowout told me to write things down. She said it would help me process. Mostly it just helped me see how many mornings I woke up and checked my phone before the coffee finished brewing, hoping for a message that never came. My son stopped speaking to me on a Tuesday in March, right after I told him I wouldn't co-sign a $340,000 loan to help him and his fiancée flip a property she'd found. He stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught him to scramble eggs and change a fuse, and told me I was financially toxic and fundamentally unsupportive of his growth. I remember holding my mug and letting those words sit in the air between us like smoke. He left, didn't slam the door, which was almost worse, just closed it quietly, got in his car and drove away, and for 3 years, 4 months, and 11 days, that was the last time I was in the same room as my son. I built my company the same way most men of my generation built things, slowly with my hands, on very little sleep, 31 years of residential construction in the Carolinas. Custom homes, mostly, the kind that take 18 months and require you to understand every trade well enough to catch when someone's doing it wrong. I started with 2 employees and a truck with a bent tailgate, and I retired with a 15-person crew and a reputation that meant I had more work than I could take. I tell you that not to brag. I tell you because it explains how I think. When something doesn't fit, when a beam looks right but the numbers say it shouldn't hold, you don't shrug and move on. You go back to the foundation. The text came on a Wednesday evening, 9:15. I was on the back porch, watching the last of the light go out over the tree line, same as I do most nights since I sold the company and bought this on Lake Norman. The notification lit up the phone face down on the railing. I didn't recognize the number at first, not because I deleted it, I never deleted it, but because hope makes you careful. You don't want to believe it's him and then find out it's spam for a car warranty. But even before I turned the phone over all the way, I knew. You don't forget your own son's number, even when 3 years have turned it into something you almost recognize, the way you almost recognize a song playing from a different room. Dad, Petra and I are getting married in June. I want you there. We've set up a meeting next Friday at 11 a.m. with our estate attorney. There are some financial arrangements we need to formalize before the wedding. This is your opportunity to be part of this family again. Come to the office or don't, your call. I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone down on the railing, face up, and just looked at it for a while. Not one word asking how I was, not a single word about the 3 years of silence. No, I'm sorry, or I've been thinking about you. Just a time, a place, and the word arrangements. And still, I want to be honest with you about this because it matters. Part of me felt relief. That small, stupid corner of a father's heart that never actually closes, no matter how long the silence runs or how ugly the last words were. I felt it flicker on like a pilot light that's been sitting cold for years waiting for gas. Welcome to Dad's Pure Revenge. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me, because this story is going to take you somewhere real. Hit that like button and drop a comment below so I know where you're listening from. I'll be reading every single one. I didn't answer that night. Couldn't bring myself to. Instead, I got up and walked through the house, past the bookcase where the encyclopedia set used to be, the one he'd pull volumes from at random, and just read the way other kids watched cartoons. Past the garage where we'd spent 2 full summers restoring a '68 Mustang that he sold 3 weeks after I signed the title over to him. Past the spare bedroom that still has a poster on the back of the closet door, Led Zeppelin, slightly crooked, left over from when this was just a room where he crashed between college semesters. I didn't go in. I just stood at the door for a moment with my hand against the frame. He was 26 the day he walked out of my kitchen, 26 years old, and his fiancée had been in his life for about 14 months, and the change in him during those 14 months had been so gradual that I'd almost talked myself into thinking I was imagining it. The way he stopped asking my opinion about things, the way he'd repeat certain phrases, financially toxic, fundamentally unsupportive, phrases that didn't sound like him at all, that had the cadence of something rehearsed. The way every conversation eventually circled back to money. I went back to the porch and sat with that text until almost midnight. Here's what I kept coming back to. Somewhere in that message, under all the transactional language, my son had used the word family, and I held on to that the way a man holds onto a rope in bad water. It didn't matter how thin it was there. I waited until Thursday afternoon to respond. Simple, I'll be there. Now I want to be clear about what happened next because some of what I did I haven't told anyone until right now. I didn't hire a private investigator, didn't call a lawyer, didn't ask anyone to dig around. I just sat down at my kitchen table with a laptop and did what I've done every time a subcontractor showed up to a job site with credentials I couldn't verify. I looked at the paperwork. Her last name is Crane. She's 31, originally from outside Columbus, Ohio, moved to Charlotte about 4 years ago. My son met her at a rooftop event downtown, and within 6 months she'd moved into his apartment, and within 8 months she was the one answering when I called his number. The first thing I found was the civil judgment. 3 years old, filed in Franklin County, Ohio. A judgment against her for $48,000 entered after a case involving a man listed in the filing as her domestic partner. I won't use his name here. He was 63 at the time. She had been 28. The case summary described allegations of unauthorized transfer of funds from a joint checking account, a forged authorization on a home equity line of credit, and personal property removed from the shared residence prior to the end of the relationship. She'd settled. The settlement terms were sealed, but the judgment itself was public record, available to anyone with a county court login and enough patience to read it. I sat back in my chair and thought about that for a long time. In construction, when you pull a permit and see that a prior contractor had their license suspended, you don't decide it was probably a misunderstanding. You ask more questions. Because a license suspension always has a paper trail, and that paper trail always tells you something true that someone would have preferred stayed buried. I kept looking. The second thing was a protection order, also in Ohio, also from roughly 4 years before she arrived in Charlotte, filed by a woman I won't name, listed in the filing as a former landlord, though the details of the situation went well beyond a rental dispute. The order was specific. It had been extended twice before it expired. It was not the kind of document you read once and put down and think, well, there might be context I'm missing. And then there was the LLC. She'd formed one about 8 months after arriving in Charlotte, listed as a luxury event consulting company. Registered address was a mailbox service on South Tryon Street. No verifiable clients, no employees, a website that looked professional until you clicked anything. But it had one detail that stopped me cold. It was listed as a co-borrower on an SBA microloan my son had taken out the previous spring, a loan I had known nothing about, a loan that, based on the filing date, had been initiated 2 weeks after they'd announced the engagement. I'm a man who spent 31 years reading contracts, and I'll tell you what that LLC structure looked like from where I was sitting. It looked like a vehicle. And it looked like my son was the road it was built to travel on. I printed everything. Civil judgment, case number, filing date, the protection order summary, the LLC registration, the loan documentation. I put it all in a manila folder. The tan ones with a metal clasp at the top, same kind I've used for job files since 1993. I set it on the kitchen counter and looked at it for a long time. Then I went to bed, because I'm 61 years old and I've learned that some decisions are clearer after sleep and coffee, and that the ones that aren't probably weren't decisions to begin with. They were just things you had to do. Friday came fast. The attorney's office was in a building off Fairview Road, the kind of place with a fountain in the lobby and chairs that are designed to make you feel like you should already be leaving. I wore slacks and a button-down, no tie. I've never worn a tie to a meeting I actually needed to win. I got there 8 minutes early. They were already inside. My son stood up when I walked in. That surprised me. He's taller than I'd remembered. Or maybe I just let the image fade around the edges over 3 years. He extended his hand. I shook it. A handshake. 3 years, 4 months, 11 days, and we shook hands like two men who'd been introduced at a Chamber of Commerce lunch. She didn't stand. She smiled from across the conference table, the kind of smile that lives only in the lower half of a face, the eyes doing something completely different. "We're so glad you came, Gerald." First name. "Not sir, not Mr. Gerald," easy and warm, like she'd been at my holiday table a dozen times. The attorney was mid-30s, polished, the careful manner of someone very aware of his hourly rate. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a trust document, 40-some pages, dense, the kind of thing engineered to feel overwhelming to anyone who hasn't read 40 pages of legalese before. But I went straight to Section 4, which is always where the actual power lives in any contract. The trust would hold my lake house, my retirement accounts, partially, a CD ladder I'd built quietly over the last 6 years that I hadn't mentioned to my son or anyone else. The beneficiary and co-trustee structure listed her LLC alongside my son. "What this does," the attorney said carefully, "is give the family flexibility in the event of an unexpected health situation on your part. It simplifies the estate transfer process so that Kieran and—" "I understand what it does," I said. My son looked at me. Not hostile, almost, and I want to be precise about this, almost hopeful. like some part of him had spent the last week wondering which version of his father was going to walk through that door. Dad, he said, we're not asking for anything you wouldn't want us to have eventually. We're just trying to be proactive. There was that word again. She leaned forward slightly. Kieran talks about everything you built. The company, the reputation, you worked so hard for all of it. We want to protect that legacy. A small pause. Together. I let that word sit without picking it up. The manila folder was on my lap under the edge of the table. Nobody in that room knew it was there. I looked at my son, really looked at him, the way I look at a load-bearing wall I'm not sure about. And what I saw was a man who had been talked into something, and who believed he was doing me a favor. That's the most dangerous situation I know. Someone doing wrong while being completely convinced they're doing right. I need to say something, I said, to you, not to the room. She started to speak. I held up one hand, not aggressive, just the way you hold a hand up on a job site when someone's about to walk into a hazard they haven't seen yet. Kieran, I said. He met my eyes. I drove an hour and 40 minutes to be here today, and I want you to know that wasn't about this document. I didn't reach for the folder. Not yet. I came because you're my son. Because regardless of what the last 3 years looked like, regardless of how that chapter ended, that has not changed. I need you to know that before anything else gets said. Something shifted behind his eyes. He pushed it down fast. But I need you to look at something before anyone puts pen to paper, I said. I brought the folder out from under the table and set it flat in the center of the conference table, right on top of the trust document, the same way I've set inspection reports on tables for 31 years. Everything in that folder is public record, I said, and I was looking at my son, not at her. Case numbers, filing dates, document IDs. You can pull every page yourself from the Franklin County Clerk of Court's website. It'll take you about 20 minutes. I watched her face go still, not pale still, the particular stillness of someone doing a rapid internal calculation. I'm not going to tell you what to do with what's in there, I said to my son. You're a grown man, and that is your call to make. I'm asking you to read it. The attorney looked at her. She looked at the folder. She did not reach for it. I stood up, straightened my chair the way my mother had taught me to always straighten a chair when you're leaving a room, buttoned the middle button of my jacket. I love you, I said to my son. That part has no conditions on it, but I'm not signing this today. I left 4 of my old business cards on the edge of the table, habit from decades on job sites, and walked out. If you've been listening for a while, go ahead and drop a comment right now. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit the like and make sure you're subscribed, because I'm going to keep talking, and what comes next is the part most people don't tell. I drove home on I-485 with the windows down even though it was 43 degrees. I needed the air. The weekend passed the way that kind of weekend passes, not quietly in the house, but quietly everywhere else. I worked in the garage Saturday, reorganized a parts cabinet I'd been meaning to get to for 2 years. Sunday I went to church, said a prayer I wasn't entirely sure I believed, came home to a house that felt about twice its actual size. I didn't call my son, he didn't call me. His mother texted Sunday afternoon. We've been civil since the divorce, genuinely civil, which took work and I'm proud of. She asked if something had happened. I told her I'd fill her in when I could. She said okay and sent a prayer emoji, which I appreciated more than she'll probably ever know. The call came Monday morning at 6:52. I was standing at the kitchen window, second cup of coffee, watching the fog come up off the water. It was my son. Dad, just that, one word with a whole weather system inside it. I'm here, I said. He had read the folder. He didn't say it exactly that way, but I could hear it in the quality of the silence before he spoke again. Not the silence of anger, but the silence of someone who has been sitting with something heavy since Saturday morning and hasn't slept right since. The man in Ohio, he said finally. She told me he was a controlling ex who tried to destroy her after she ended things. I know that's what she told you, I said. That's why I gave you the case number, so you could read what he said and what the court found in his words. I called the clerk's office Saturday afternoon. He went quiet for a moment. Dad, she was 28, he was 63. I didn't say anything. Some things don't need a response. Some things just need to be said out loud, and then allowed to sit in the silence until they become real. She doesn't know I read it, he said. She thinks I didn't look. Okay, I said. I don't know what to do. I know, I said, and I'm not going to tell you. That part belongs to you. He exhaled the way a man exhales when he's been carrying something heavy and has finally set it down, even though his arms still ache. Why didn't you just say it? At the meeting, why not just tell me what was in the folder? Because if I'd said it out loud in that room, I told him, with her sitting right there next to you, you'd have defended her. You'd have gotten up, taken her side, and driven away, and another 3 years would have gone by. The only way any of it was ever going to matter was if you found it yourself, on your own time and your own hands. A long silence. Then I'm sorry, Dad, for the 3 years, for walking out of your kitchen like that, for all of it. Here's what nobody tells you about an apology you've spent years waiting for. You spend a lot of quiet evenings imagining how it'll feel, like a window opening, like a pressure releasing, like finally being able to breathe all the way down. What it actually feels like is more like setting something down you'd been carrying so long you'd stopped noticing the weight. It's relief, and it also aches, because now you have to figure out what to do with hands that are finally empty. I know you are, I said, and I'm sorry, too, for any part I played in us getting to that kitchen in the first place. He was quiet another moment. She moved her things out Friday night, right after the meeting. Okay, I said. I ended the engagement Saturday morning. I looked out at the lake. The fog was starting to thin at the edges, the water coming clearer underneath it. Are you all right? No, he said, not really, but I think I'm going to be. There's something I learned in construction that took me close to 15 years to fully believe. The strongest structures are not the ones that never flex. They're the ones built with enough give that when the load shifts, when the wind comes sideways, they bend instead of fracture. Rigid things shatter. Things with give hold. I spent a long time trying to build my son rigid because I thought rigidity was what strength looked like. I wanted him unbreakable in the way that I imagined unbreakable to mean hard all the way through, nothing getting in. What I didn't understand, standing at the window of a house I'd bought with 31 years of early mornings and late job sites, was that what he'd actually needed from me was not armor. He needed to watch me bend and not break. He needed to see that a man can absorb a loss, absorb 3 years of silence, absorb being handed a document designed to take what he'd spent a lifetime building, and still walk out of that room straight spine, still say I love you, without flinching. Still leave the truth on the table and trust the other person to pick it up. I hadn't known how to show him that when he was 26. I wasn't sure I'd known how to live it yet myself. 2 weekends later, he drove up on a Saturday. We didn't fix anything, didn't have a long talk about what had happened. He handed me tools while I worked on a project in the garage, and I walked him through what I was doing, and we talked the way men sometimes have to relearn how to talk, slowly, about nothing important, until the nothing important stops being nothing. Before he left, he stopped in the doorway and turned around. The folder, he said. You had that already put together before you even walked in. I did, I said. How long had you been working on it? Long enough to be sure, I said. He nodded slowly, the way he used to nod as a kid when something finally clicked, like it made sense. And it did, because he'd grown up watching me work. He knew I didn't walk onto a job site without reading the plans at least twice. I'm glad you came to that meeting, he said. I'm glad you called Monday morning, I said. I stood in the driveway and watched his truck go down the road until the taillights went around the bend and disappeared. Then I went back inside, picked up my coffee mug from the counter, realized it had gone cold. Drank it anyway, standing in the kitchen in the quiet. The leather journal is still on the nightstand. I haven't opened it since that Monday phone call. I don't think I need it anymore. But if I did, if I opened it to today and wrote something down, it would be this. The longest distance between two people is not 3 years of silence. It's the moment when the truth is sitting flat on the table between you and one of you has to decide whether to reach for it. I put it there. My son picked it up. The rest we're building back together, one Saturday at a time, the only way I know how to build anything that lasts. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't yet. I'll see you at the next one.